Welcome to the Future Is Freelance podcast, brought to you by Zolo, the operating system of the solo economy. Every week, we'll be serving up an audio cocktail of expert tips, inspired insights, and stories from the frontiers of freelancing to help you grow your borderless business to new heights and live life on your own terms. So kick back, grab a snack, and let's get started. Hey, Future Is Freelance listeners, come a bit closer because I want to tell you a story. We all have stories, don't we? And today's guest is no exception. Lidia Rumley is a branding consultant who specializes in helping brands draw out their unique story, the thing that makes them truly differentiated in the marketplace, whether they're a brand new startup that's going to conquer the world or a solopreneur who wants to carry on working, doing their unique thing in just the way that we've talked about so often on this show. I think you'll find Lidia's insights really helpful and valuable when it comes to thinking about how you present your business, from your elevator pitch to your logo. The stories we tell to ourselves and to other people are really what represents us in the world because of the emotional connection they create. Lidia is so knowledgeable, bringing her wealth of corporate experience to a decade of freelancing and working with businesses of all different sizes. I think you'll find this one extremely valuable, particularly as the end of the year approaches and we start to think about what we want from our freelancing businesses in 2023 and beyond. So enjoy. So hello, Lidia. It's great to have you with us at the Future Is Freelance. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Maya. It's really nice to be here. Appreciate it.
Well, we're going to have an interesting conversation today, I'm sure, because we want to learn from you all about how to tell stories with your brands. But first of all, I'd love to know a little bit about your backstory, because we always like to dig into how our guests came to be doing what they're doing here now, why and where. So tell me a little bit about the Lidia brand story.
It's a great question. I think that my brand story started all the way back in childhood, to be honest. The first time I picked up a book, and I have always, as far back as I can remember, I've always appreciated the ability that stories have to transport you somewhere completely different, somewhere sometimes magical, somewhere unusual. And even though I work with words every day, I'm quite a visual person, so I can almost see the places that I read about. And yeah, I've read all my life. When my parents wanted me to learn piano, I hid books behind my piano books, waited for them to be out of earshot and sat there and read. And at every opportunity I can think of, I had my nose in a book. And fast forward 20 years or so from that, I ended up in a career in PR, which was all about creating and selling stories to the press. I worked in the video games industry. I worked for some of the real major players, looking after their PR, and really putting those stories together every day. And it was when I left to go alone, which was almost 10 years ago now, as a freelance PR consultant, that I started to appreciate the power of brand, because I was working with clients who wanted PR, wanted exposure, wanted to raise awareness of their businesses, but so often didn't know what story they wanted to tell. And so it was a little bit of a happy accident, I think, that I spent quite a lot of time, even as a PR consultant, working with my clients on mapping out that story before we decided to go to press. And I realised that I loved it. That's the thing that I really enjoy doing the most. And so for a number of years now, I've actually let go of the media side of the work that I used to do as PR consultant. And now I'm a brand consultant working on that backstory with people.
Fantastic. And I love how you got there, that it started off as that little girl Lidia reading behind her piano books, and I bet under the covers at night with the torch. Yeah, I'm guessing.
Still do every night. It's how I end every single day. And I love it because it means I've got something to look forward to every single day. Yeah, so that's how I close my days, is with a book. So no torch required now. I have a Kindle.
No, we're grown-ups now. We can put the light on if we want to. Choose our own bedtimes. No, it's nice that we channeled those things. Wherever your career takes you, you find this golden thread. And for you, it's clearly about story, and it's led you to branding and working with small businesses and freelancers. Now, we work a lot with people who are like yourself 10 years ago, transitioning maybe from the employed state, doing what they're doing, and then wanting to take that to freelance and working independently for themselves for a variety of reasons. But it seems to me a lot of them struggle to define themselves and differentiate themselves. We've done a lot of work on this podcast. We've had people talking about social media, about SEO, but I really wanted to zero in about branding and why do you think freelancers, maybe especially in the sort of knowledge work economy, find it difficult to define their brand and find their story?
You know what? I think there's a really clear answer to that, and one that I see with almost everybody that I work with. And that is that we're all too close to our own stories. You know, our stories are made up of masses of experiences, a whole lifetime of things we've done, things we've learned, things we've tried, things we liked, things we didn't like. And for any founder starting a business, it might be different things that have inspired them to get to that point. But in our heads, it's a bit of a jumble. We've got all of that lifetime of information swirling around, and we're just standing in the middle of it. And sometimes it's hard to see the wood for the trees. So that's why it's great to have somebody on the outside of that, somebody who can be a little bit more objective, who can ask the right questions, extract the right information, and start to make sense of everything that's in there. Sometimes it's about knowing which are the really salient things that need to form part of your story. Sometimes it's about understanding that there's been an experience in your life that has been important, but you can sort of politely thank it and retire it from here on in, and know that it doesn't really, not everything needs to be a part of that future story. But unraveling that can be quite challenging.
Yes, it sounds like you're almost taking your clients through a therapeutic journey of what bits to keep, what bits to let go.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've got one of my clients always says, "You're my counsellor." I love talking to my counsellor. And, you know, I'm not a counsellor. I'm not a coach. I'm a consultant. I do the work with you and for you. But, yeah, it is quite a cathartic process, actually. It's quite an enjoyable process when I work with any kind of client, whether I'm working with individual founders or sometimes small leadership teams. You know, people actually, once they get stuck into it, quite enjoy revisiting all the things that are going on around them. And I think also they start to see the potential that they can tap into, and they start to uncover a little bit about what makes them so unique. And that's really what building a brand is all about. It's about setting your business apart from all the others. Most of us aren't lucky enough to be the only ones that do what we do. I'm certainly not the only brand consultant. You're not the only podcast host. So, you know, we all have to do the best we can to separate ourselves from our competition. There's, you know, I believe there's room for all of us out there. I do. You know, it's about trying to match yourself with like-minded people, clients, customers, people who align with the way you do things, the way you see things. And that's another part of it, is just not trying to be everything to everyone.
Yes, that's really important, isn't it? I really like the idea that we don't have to try and be everybody's favourite, be everybody's match. And in a global marketplace, we can we not, as freelancers and small businesses?
I think especially for freelancers. Yeah, sorry. I think especially for freelancers, and I think especially for those freelancers and businesses that are offering services, you know, if you're a business of 1 to maybe even 10 people, there's a limit to how many clients you can serve. So you don't need to worry about hitting 60 million people. You can hit a far smaller pot, but it's better to hit them well so that you can continually create that connection with the right people, keep your pipeline of work flowing, overflowing, hopefully.
Yeah, that sounds good. So, but what is it about story? Because that was why I was particularly drawn to your own brand. out of all the branding consultants out there. As you pointed out, there are a lot of them, maybe because I was a bookworm too as a child and still to this day. But there's something really universal about the power of story, but not everybody understands how that relates to business and defining what they do. So can you help us join those ideas together?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really simple. Stories help us connect. Stories make us relate our experiences to the experience of others. And that creates a very emotional connection. And, when we buy, whether we're buying a business service, whether we're buying a product, we're so often buying with our hearts, not our heads. We're wanting to think, oh, I love that. I love more and more in this day and age, because I suppose there is such a wealth of businesses out there. It's so much easier to set up a business than it was. So we've got a huge amount of choice. And so we're really looking to feel inspired by those brands that we want to work with, buy from, connect with. And stories give us a really good way of doing that. And I think the other thing that's brilliant about storytelling is it makes things more memorable in the hearts and minds of your customers. So listening to facts is okay, and it's important in some contexts, but it's quite hard to make that emotional connection with the fact, and it's also quite hard to remember so many. But we learn through stories. We can relate stories back to other people. We can pass them on a lot more easily than we can facts. So I think that's why it's so powerful. We're all used to some form of storytelling in our lives, whether it's being a bookworm like you and me, whether it's the TV that we watch, whether it's, massive stuff we consume on social media now. But stories really give us that hook in to the right people.
Yeah, I suppose it just makes complete sense from an evolutionary point of view. We didn't have books until a few seconds ago in terms of the lifespan of the human species. We certainly didn't have Notion and Evernote and ways to capture and remember things. So we relied on story for that narrative arc and to penetrate our brains, I suppose. There's something quite unifying as well, I suppose, about bringing people together for a story. Again, thinking back to childhood or gathering around a campfire when we were cave people or something. How does story draw people in like that? It's so powerful.
Because I think it taps into the experiences that they've had and the experiences that they can relate to. And that's really, fundamentally, we're all quite selfish as consumers of anything. We're all, if I go onto Google looking for something, I'm not really going there to magnanimously go and find out about everything going on in the world. I'm usually going there to solve a problem. I need this or I need that or having trouble with this, So actually, so often people want to be spoken to in that way. They want somebody to appreciate the pain that they're feeling. And the brands that do brilliantly in terms of connecting with their customers are the ones that do that, the ones that don't stand on a soapbox just broadcasting about who they are and what they do and what their experience is, but actually it's the ones who talk to you as though they know you. And it's usually through that power of story and that sort of shared experience, shared values. That's the thing that draws people in. And that's the thing that hopefully I always say, when you go to Google, you don't want to Google forever. Hopefully it's the thing that makes people stop Googling and makes you think, perfect, I found exactly what I need here.
Yes, hopefully if people have listened to our recent episode with Zoe on social media and SEO, then you'll be top of those lists and people will immediately click through because Lydia's helped you get your branding right, and then you will satisfy that need and you will do business. So that sounds
exactly.
Good. So obviously we're not cavemen sitting around the fireside anymore. So what does your process look like with clients when someone comes to you and says, I don't know where to start with my branding? What do you do?
So I have a couple of different ways that I work with clients because one of the things I would say, particularly to businesses that are starting out, is maybe don't worry about too much too soon when it comes to your brand. Seems odd for a brand person to say. I think it's great to start a business with brand in mind because it's a really necessary part of running a successful business these days. However, a part of running a successful business is listening to your customers, understanding what's going on in the marketplace. And sometimes you can't know all of that stuff inside out the day that you launch. You can launch with the best possible arrangement and offer in mind, but often you'll find that in the first 12 months, 18 months, you're going to make some tweaks because you're going to learn that your customers might be asking questions you didn't anticipate. They might be looking for something you hadn't originally made part of what you sell. And so it's good to have that flexibility to make those adjustments in your business before you sort of set everything relatively in stone. And I say relatively because a brand should be a living, breathing entity. It's not a create it once, tick it off your to-do list, put it in a drawer and job done. And the reason for that is regardless of whether your business, even if your business stays the same for the next 5 years, if nothing else changes, the chances are that something will have changed in the marketplace, something might have changed in economic conditions, which of course we're massively seeing now everywhere. Something might have changed in your customers, what they're looking for. So you always have to be prepared to evolve your brand, keep it ticking over as your business sort of grows and scales up. But for people starting out, I think I usually work with my startup clients on setting a concept for the brand. So a sort of general direction, if you like. So it's something that enables them to start thinking of their business in the right way, building it with the right sort of ideas in mind that are coherent and that make sense. I talk a lot about making sense. I think branding is a lot about making what you do make sense to the world. And just giving you enough to get that initial offer out there in order to test that market, in order to be able to see how your customers respond. And then it's something that you can go on and develop a little bit more detail later down the line. So working on your sort of more complete brand story, more complete brand strategy, which involves looking at things like your mission, vision, and values, your audiences, your tone of voice, your brand messaging. They're all the things that I would do with businesses who are a little bit more established and who have a better sense of where things are going for them, so that they can put all of those really strong brand foundations into place. And they're going to support that business for years to come. You know, I talked about evolving it, which is important. But if you work on your branding in the right way, if you set the parameters really well to begin with, then you're not rebranding every 12, 18 months, 3 years, whatever it might be. You're just tweaking. You're looking at what's going on around you and you're making a few adjustments. And then generally people find when they do that, they're completely reinvigorated again and off they go, ready to tackle the next chapter, ready to hit the next targets, ready to do whatever it is they want to do to be successful.
Are you feeling inspired about your own freelance future? Maybe nurturing a business idea of your own, which could create the lifestyle of your dreams? Zolo is the perfect place to bring those dreams to life with an intuitive tech stack and business support suite designed around what every freelancer needs. Whether you want a quick and easy way to raise an invoice or an EU-based fully featured private limited company of your own, Zolo is the place to take care of your back office admin in just 10 minutes a day, so you can concentrate on transforming your vision into reality. Visit Zolo.io, that's Zolo with an X, or check out the link in your show notes for our latest offers. It's one of those invisible things, isn't it, that so many businesses, if they do it well enough, you almost can't see that evolution because it just feels like a natural part of a brand growing up or progressing or responding. I know that Zolo, who are responsible for this podcast, have recently done some rebranding around their colours and their visual appearance. And to me, as a words person, that's just mind-blowing when I look at all the work that they've done. And I can see in the web that, the website still looks great, but somehow it looks fresher and different. And I'm not a graphics person. I have no conception of why that color goes next to that one, and it can't ever go next to that one because it just doesn't work. And that's anti-brand. But somehow, they've put all that together, and we just follow that, and it works.
I think it's all about telling a story. A brand is made up of a number of different things. There's the brand story, sort of brand strategy, the side of things, the words bit that I work on. But of course, there's the visual side that you talk about as well. The logo, the colours, the typeface that you use. You might have other graphics and images that support your brand. And they're really important these days particularly because of social media, because we have all these platforms which are brilliant and they're free and they give us the opportunity to get our businesses seen. So it's a no-brainer to be using them. But we also have to generate a lot of content in order to use them well. So having a really robust visual identity is just as important. But I always say to people, start with your story, because your story defines the meaning behind your brand. It talks, it really looks at why you exist. You hear a lot of what's your why are you here, what's your purpose, what are you here to achieve, and how are you going to do it? People, I talked a little bit earlier about values, and people really, we're in a very values-driven society at the moment. People really want to feel that alignment with like-minded other people. But your visual identity can't really tell that story until you know what it is you stand for and why you're here. But in an ideal world, you start with your story, then you have a brilliant brand designer who looks at that story, understands how to get under the skin of your brand, and uses their expertise to then convey that story to your audience. And that is super important. People can often be drawn into, I like this colour, or I like that colour, or that speaks to me. That's great if you're part of your target audience. If you're not, then it might just miss the spot a little bit with them. So looking at building the whole brand is quite important.
Yeah, that's such an important point. And I suppose that brings us on to something else we really must discuss, is what kind of mistakes do you see, especially with small businesses and freelancers who might, they've dreamed of having their own business for years and they're finally out there going solo. What would be your cautionary word, or the things that they must think about and not get wrong?
I think one is definitely on the theme of what we were just talking about. One is understand that brand is more than a logo. A logo in its own right won't necessarily create that point of connection with your audience. It's important. People often jump to that partly because it's what they know of branding, and it's certainly a part of branding, but also it's very tangible. We all know if we have a website, we need to put something on it. So it's common to jump into that. I spoke to a small business a couple of years ago, and it really stuck with me, where this person said, in a conversation, and they said, I've done my branding. And I thought, that's interesting. We're talking, but what they really meant was I've created a logo. And as we had this conversation for a little while talking about the business, my job was to sort of understand a little bit about who they were, why they were here, what they were doing. And it transpired that the sort of key purpose of the business was to create calm in an overwhelming space. And then we looked at the visual identity, which was bright red. And when you slap a whole lot of bright red across, for example, an Instagram feed, it doesn't feel very calming. It's a whole different message. Colours have all sorts of psychological meanings. And it's a really good example of why jumping into designing your logo before you've worked on the meaning of your brand can come back and bite you a little bit. So I think that's a big watch out. I think the other big one is freelancers, small businesses, startups are all working with quite limited budgets. And it's quite understandable that you can't necessarily invest and outsource everything that you might like to when you're in those early stages. However, a really big mistake that I see people make is they're working with a tight budget, and so they think, oh, I won't do that right now. I'll put it into marketing, because marketing means I might get a sale. I might, if I put an ad out there or invest in a PR or whatever it might be. The problem with that is, what is it that you're conveying in that marketing? If your brand message isn't clear, if you haven't defined the purpose, it's very difficult to make that piece of marketing pay you back. And I see time and again small business founders, entrepreneurs coming back saying, oh, I've done all this stuff and it hasn't worked. And it hasn't worked because you have to get the foundations right. But sometimes I understand why doing all the work behind the scenes feels a bit less glamorous, I suppose, than just getting out there and shouting to the world.
But we want to launch, don't we? We want to actually ship something and get it out there. That's the startup culture.
Exactly. We want to start getting those sales in. Of course we do. At that startup phase, there's that little bit of anxiety of, will my idea work? And so that we validate that by being able to sell it and knowing that, yes, I did the right thing. People want to buy it. That's great. I was speaking yesterday at a branding event, actually, to small business founders, and overwhelmingly the message coming back from the people in the audience was, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to put this out there. I've created this brilliant thing and I'm brilliant at doing it, but I don't know how to get it out to the world. And your brand is the thing that's going to guide you. It's the guiding light of your business, because it pulls together everything that's important for you to know and everything that's important for your customer to know. And it knits, from a story perspective, it knits those things together in a way that is interesting and compelling and saleable, ultimately.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense, because you decide to launch your freelance photography business because you're a photographer, not because you're a branding expert. And there are so many things that as freelancers we suddenly realize we've got to figure out for ourselves, and you can't do it all. You can't be an expert at it all. So it just makes total sense that you use Solo to manage your bookkeeping and your day-to-day administration of your business, and you talk to a branding consultant about getting that initial messaging clear in your own mind, so that everything you then do can reflect that and amplify it. I know that one issue that we've had with a lot of freelancers and small businesses is this kind of cart before horse, or chicken and egg, of branding, naming, claiming your domain, all of these different things that seem to have to happen more or less simultaneously. And I know that a lot of people get confused. I get confused about what order you should do that decision making. Do you have any kind of advice on that front? Where do you start?
I do. I said it before, and I say it a lot in the work that I do, but start with your story. If you start with your story, it's really pinning down everything that is important about your business. I don't worry so much about naming and things like that. And there's all sorts of things. I mean, I've worked with companies on renaming. There's always a solution to finding a name. But it's going to be easier to find a name if you know what it is you're trying to convey in the first place. You're going to find something more fitting. You're going to find a solution to the domain name problem, even if perhaps your most obvious domain name is gone. There's always ways and means to get around these things. So I think it's, don't worry too much about the end product. Start with a really sound strategy. If you start with, and that doesn't just apply to branding, I think that applies to business planning and financial planning in your business and all these other things, that the more strategic you can be, the more you can really get into the heart of what it is you need to achieve with your business, then the more likely it is that you're going to be successful with the work that you do. So jumping ahead sort of makes us feel a bit better sometimes, because we think, I've got a name, got a website. So you feel as though it's that notion that we've ticked something off the list. But sometimes you might find that you're then having to go back and undo some of that stuff. I think it's in that spirit of evolving your brand. What you do today doesn't have to last forever either. So create what works with a little bit of future vision. I think it's quite hard for many small businesses to think more than 3 to 5 years down the line, if that. But, start with a little bit of future vision in mind, start mapping things out, and know that actually, if your business evolves in a particular way, it's going to make sense to your audience when you make some of those changes anyway. And you can actually bring them on the journey with you. It's not about, today we're this and tomorrow we're that. That might be a little bit jarring for people. But actually, if you start letting your audience in, which of course, as nosy consumers, we all love to see behind the scenes. We all love to see the people behind the brand. It always works well in terms of creating that emotional connection I spoke about earlier. Then bring them on your journey with you. Talk to them about what's happening in your business. Talk to them about why your brand might be looking a little bit different in a couple of months' time, and share the work that you're doing with them, because it keeps them invested with you as well. Yeah. And it makes them get to know you better. I guess. It is. It's another part. It's another. Yeah. I think that, the world, the business world has pleasantly changed, in my opinion, over the last decade that I've been in that sort of freelance world. I think when I first came out of the sort of corporate life, I think there was a feeling that you had to project something very grand. And there was a sense of websites always talked about, we do this and we do that, even when it was a business of one. And, I think now the freelance economy is obviously booming. It's much more respected and accepted by all sorts of other businesses out there. I think people have quite a warm sort of disposition to small businesses in a lot of cases. And so you can break down some of those barriers now with your brand. It can be, I am here, I do this, I bring value. As long as you can demonstrate that value that you bring, you don't have to have a huge glossy veneer. In fact, people like it when brands are a little bit more real and open and down to earth.
Yeah, it's sort of relatable and authentic. Do you think that's, you talked about it being a shift in business culture. Do you think it's bigger than that, more of a societal thing, a Gen Z thing, that people want to identify with an individual and with particular values that they might align with or not?
I think they do, because, I think social media in particular has given all of us a platform, not just businesses, not just celebrities, it's not just the news. We all have that ability. And I suppose as a part of that, we've become more demanding about everything. We've become, if we're going to go out there and spend that pound, we want to spend it in a meaningful way. And so that meaning comes from connection. It comes from, I like these people. I like what they stand for. I care about what it is they're trying to do. And I think there are particularly younger generations that are very tuned into that, very tuned into what brands stand for.
Yeah, it's such an interesting shift, and it's hopefully one that supports the solo economy and being authentic and differentiated as individuals. And that's got to be good for the future of freelancing. I mean, thinking about the future now, I know it's really difficult, but we're coming up to the end of a year and going into something new. Do you have any thoughts about trends in branding or things we ought to be looking out for in 2023 and beyond?
I don't know whether you'd call it a trend because it exists, but I think the notion of personal branding is huge and will continue to be huge. And I think that we've seen so much change in the workplace and the business marketplace over the last 2 years in particular, with everything that happened with the pandemic, with how people work. So much has changed. And I think there's an ever-increasing need to, even if you're employed and not freelancing, I think to build that personal brand, because it delivers so much about you to, whether it's your employers, whether it's, if you're a freelancer, it's your clients, your customers, the people who follow you on social media, the people that you want to inspire perhaps. So I think that's going to continue to be a really dominant thing in the marketplace. And I think, look, economic times are tough. We mentioned it earlier. And, you know, we're seeing great sweeps of people losing their jobs across big organizations. And a lot of those people are going to be, you know, they're going to take that opportunity to say, maybe I want to do something different. Maybe this is my time to try something new, got nothing to lose. So, you know, I think that freelance world is just going to continue to boom as it has done. And do you know what's brilliant? It's amazing, actually, to see how much opportunity is out there. I didn't ever think I was going to be running a business. 20 years ago, it wasn't something on my agenda, but the way that things have evolved has made it really possible for me to do that. And it has for lots of other people as well. So I love it. I love seeing the kinds of things that appear in that freelance marketplace. You know, I'm a business of one. I fully intend to remain a business of one for a number of reasons, but I love to work in collaboration, and I love seeing the sheer wealth of other experts in my world that exist. You know, I work a lot with brand designers. I work a lot with photographers, copywriters, web designers, PR people, all sorts of people that are involved in that world of building your brand and bringing it to life, putting it out there so that you as a business can be successful. And it honestly has gone beyond my wildest dreams, what my world today looks like versus how it used to. And I hope that people listening will take a bit of motivation from that, because when you're in the earlier stages of setting up a business, it might be scary and daunting and lonely, actually, at times. You know, it's great and convenient to work from home, but it can also be quite a lonely experience. And I think part of building and delivering your brand is actually working hard to make those connections. Might be with people you collaborate with. It might be people who end up evangelizing your business. It might be people who, in some shape or form, are going to help you to realize those goals that you have. So, you know, it could be anything from all the work you do on your social media channels, through to networking, through to speaking at events, and through to being a guest on a lovely podcast.
Well, that's a wonderful note to end on. And I love the optimism around, you know, this is a difficult time. We're seeing so many layoffs in tech and elsewhere, but there are some amazing people out there who have the potential to do great things in the freelance economy in the new year. And they'll all be needing to think about their branding. So if people want to contact you, Lidia, where's the best way to find out more about your work and engage your services?
So you can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram, or most easily probably via my website, which is thebrandstoryteller.co.uk. And always love to connect with other freelancers.
Fabulous. We'll put all those links into the show notes. You've been given loads of stuff that people can think about to do on their own. But if you do want to go to the next level and get some professional help with it, you know that Lydia is going to be the person to help you out. So I think this has been a really inspiring conversation. Thanks so much for joining us, Lydia, on The Future is Freelance.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Future is Freelance podcast, brought to you by Zolo.io, who offer compliance, taxation, invoicing and admin solutions for fiercely independent solopreneurs across the globe. From simply getting paid to launching a full EU-based limited company, Solo has you covered, thanks to Estonian e-residency and a superb suite of streamlined business software. If you enjoyed the show, please like, rate and comment and subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts.